That's one, yeah.
We need a different backfit. They're like, whatever the enactment is, I guess.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Oconee County Planning Commission, this October 17th at 5:02. Our first order of business is invocation. Mr. Nix, would you please?
Yes, sir. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we ask that you please watch over this committee and the planning staff and guide us to wise and safety-conscious decisions in support of the public. We also ask that you watch over the county law enforcement, first responders, and other county workers as they perform their duties, that they may return home safely to their families after every shift. We also ask that you please watch over the county and state leaders as they work to make the county and state a better place to live each day. In his name we pray. Amen.
Pledge, please.
Oh, sorry about that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. All right, y'all have before you the minutes of our October the 3rd meeting. Your motion to approve?
I have one more change.
So moved.
What,
Do I have a
one
second?
change? How do I do that?
What?
Ask for correction.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any correction?
Yeah, just one word. Sorry. Number 3, require that all junkyards shall comply with the applicable chapters at the standard. It should be of the standard fire. Under B, number 3. Little preposition.
Okay.
You see it? Okay.
Anything else? Those in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
Public comment, non-agenda items. Mr. John?
Commissioners, I'm not real, in 4 minutes, I don't know what I'm going to get to cover this evening. But the reason I'm here is that I've been reading some articles in the paper in the last couple of months, so I got to wondering what's going on. And the reason I'm wondering what's going on is I've spent 37 years in civil engineering and surveying. Did an awful lot of work in subdivisions and plats, along with water and wastewater paving and drainage. And I'm concerned that, first off, I can't see quite where the commission's going. To me, you ladies and gentlemen should be about almost as important, just that shy of the council. And here's the reason. You're guiding the future of the county. Now, the county repaving a road is an item to keep the roads going. But you're looking at approving for eternity. Now, not for a developer wanting to build a piece of property, develop it out, talk about it, what's going to happen in 2 years. This is eternity we're talking about. 100 years from now, what you're approving is going to set the standard. So here's the deal. I started looking at a couple of months ago at what's going on, and I couldn't understand, so I started to, I thought I'll make me up a notebook, 3-ring binder. Well, let's see. Let me refresh you on your ordinances for development and subdivisions. 1 page. Here's the deal. I don't know this. I'm not here, by the way, to chastise you, ladies and gentlemen, because I was on a commission once and I understand, it's a non-paying job, but I want to impress upon you from the county standpoint, whether they know it or not, how important you are. And these decisions are real important. This business of approving, well, okay, let's drop back. I started working in this business in 1970. I kind of saw a little bit of what y'all have here, what y'all call ordinances, a little bit. Didn't last very long because where I was working was a little more progressive. I'm going to equate these ordinances to you as circa 1950, maybe 1960. Y'all are behind. You're getting ready, you're talking about growth, and there's a lot needs to be done for y'all to come up to speed on what's going on in the real world. Because and believe me, I understand, y'all didn't do this. You're trying to operate with it. What I'm trying to, I guess I'm going to try to encourage you to do is to do something different, because this isn't going to get it. You're getting ready to run yourself into a big, big bottleneck of subdivisions that are not getting the proper review. And we're going to wind up as citizens, after I'm long gone, with the same crappy roadways. And I can, if I had more time, I explain to you why they are that way, that we have today. Because you're approving something under the roads clause here that is circa 1960 for a 1,500-pound 1949 Ford that did 35 miles an hour. Our roads won't take that. You know, roads are based on the weight of the vehicle and how many cycles you get. By the way, there's a lot of phraseology like design speed that don't even come into play in your regulations. They're not there. So you're at 1960 today, and what I'm asking you is to consider pushing for the people in the future something more than the 19th century regulations that will entitle them and their forebears to, those coming after, to have a decent, manageable road to maintain. I'm gonna quick go into the county. My books are old. Sorry, don't have any new books, okay? But this is the International Fire Code. These ordinances take one chapter out of this fire code. And it has to do with buildings, ingress and egress from buildings for fire safety. One of the most important things that you will find in something like the AASHTO manual that is referenced one time in your road book, in your road manual. This is the Bible. It isn't, this is a 1990 edition. I don't even know if it's been updated. It's probably still good today. These two documents will give you something that will kind of show you what a cul-de-sac and how a road should terminate for the good of the people and the fire department. Essentially, a 100-foot circle at the end of every road that is longer than 150 feet. I'm going to speed on here because I know my time's running out. Further, I'm going to offer to you that I thought, well, Pickens County, they must be pretty progressive. Y'all are ahead of them. That's why they're growing so fast. You know, when a developer can come in and just snooker them just like they are snookering you. Here's Spartanburg County subdivision regulations for your quick look at it. All I did was I just copied the index. It's about 27-page document. That is to me, that's a very simple, very simple subdivision ordinance, because it really doesn't, it's probably circa 80. By the way, your codes, it looks like your codes were rewritten, or they were codified in 2006. That's probably, I'm going to guess that, I got here in 2007, but that's probably when they took the 1960 version of the ordinance and put it on the computer you have today. The other reason I got here this evening, other than started looking at this stuff, I was introduced to Ms. Spicer recently, and I asked her, I said, what do you think the chances are of me coming before the commission and offering to help you? She said, I don't know. Why don't you come down and do it? So here I am. I'm offering to help you if you want it. It's John Morey and Mountain Rest. I used to be in the phone book, but that's 1960. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm willing to help y'all. I'm willing to help train you if you think that. I don't think many of y'all come from the development community. It's highly technical. It can get very highly technical, and you're kind of being put on the spot, and you're definitely being put on the spot in that you have no guidelines to use to make these decisions you're being asked to make. So if I can help, I'm open to helping you. You need to know I'm going before the council tomorrow night. I'm going to tell them the same thing. Anything I can do, I just hope you will have the opportunity. And unfortunately, it's a huge undertaking. What I'm talking to you about is something, if you hired a consulting firm, would probably take them a year to do. If you ask them to start all over and make it right. You could take something like those Spartanburg ordinances, and you could roll your information into a format like that and develop something. That's typically what's done in this sort of situation. And so you'll know, just as background, I also developed development ordinances for a 1,000-acre, it was actually called a development, but it doubled the size of the city of Lakeway, Texas. And so I'm very familiar with this. I know what you're up against. If I can help you, I will. And I wish you the best, and Godspeed that y'all can come up with something better.
Can we comment?
Yep.
Can I
sure
switch?
can.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna tell you thank you, because I've been crying out for a year. I've told this council, or this committee, that we're 50 years behind.
Yes, you are.
We are 50 years behind.
Yes, sir.
I actually had a conversation today with the Pickens County director over there. He even made that comment to me. One thing I do disagree with you about is the development in Pickens County is at speed with this. It's kind of not, because they do have some standards. Those folks are coming here because it's unencumbered. Now, you will have some builders and developers say, oh, Connie, it's too cumbersome, it costs too much money, too many restrictions. It does not take a rocket scientist to realize we are very easy to build in this county. And I appreciate your comments and the time you spent coming here. You're right, and I'm glad somebody in the public sees how antiquated our regulations are.
Yeah,
One thing you have to realize in this county, everybody worries about private property rights and control-free zones. And I get that. But as long as we stay that way, we'll look much like southern Greenville, southern Spartanburg County very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We have small roads now. You'll see here later some things coming up about some developments coming up on some very small rural roads. And it's pretty much just a rubber stamp. You can do it because we have no way to control it, no way to stop it. So I appreciate your time greatly and what you've said, and I will be calling on you.
Okay, you're quite welcome, and I look forward to helping you.
Thank you.
Bet.
Anyone else have anything?
Of course not.
Okay, let's move on to our commissioner comments, since we've started out.
Excellent. Yep. These past 2 weeks in October have been very active for the county. Oconee County is super involved with its citizens. I just want to point out some of the comp plan sections that get a check mark. So the Kiwi Fire Department has established a helipad, and that satisfies in Chapter 7, exploring ways to increase the efficiency of emergency medical services throughout the county. So well done to the fire department there. And Chapter 4, an ongoing benchmark is to conduct annual visits and tours of county industrial facilities. I went and got a sewer tour at the OJ over there at Conross, and then I did a Back Creek tour at the pump station, and I saw the landfill. So there's 3 of our facilities that I personally went to. In Chapter 2, this is an ongoing benchmark, is to seek partnerships to assess unmet needs of alternative populations and develop strategies and leverage resources to assess those needs. 3 things satisfied that one. There was a Sertoma golf tournament that raised $30 to send kids to camp this summer. Well done there. The local Knights of Columbus gave a check of over $12,000 to the Tribble Center and $1,000 to Wild Hearts Equine. The total given to the community by the Knights is, over the last 20-some years, has been over $735,000. And at the Tribble Center, I myself am a chaperone there, and I chaperoned the folks to see the Duke World of Energy. I went specifically to see if I could check and see if David Nix was at work, but he was playing hooky that day. So, for the record, I did look, and anyway, the folks at Tribble really appreciate that, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart. I have a mentally handicapped big sister, so I love helping down there. Chapter 5, opportunities for volunteerism and cultural and recreational offerings. Walhalla gets a shout out. Their merchant market, that was fun over the weekend. Westminster and Music on Main and Jazz on the Alley satisfies the involvement in cultural programming. And the library had an Land of Legends and talked about Issaquena at the library, and that satisfied the encourage awareness of local history. Again, in Chapter 5, an ongoing benchmark, counties by visibility and regional tourism, leisure and entertainment fields. Kiwi Key hosted a pickleball tournament, 8th annual, and there were people from 8 states that came to play pickleball over a Friday and a Saturday. So there was about 500 people that came on that weekend on those 2 days. And I went around and I met people, and 4 of our 5 districts were represented. Districts 1, 2, 3, and 5. I couldn't find anybody from District 4, but anyway, well represented there at the tournament. Meet the housing needs of special populations. Tomasi DAR has done that with housing victims of domestic abuse. And last but not least, increase the awareness of Oconee residents of all ages in the performing arts. The Oconee Theater is alive and well and is, what did they do? They're doing Comedy Night and The Passion of Dracula, if anybody so cares, and many others. But it was a very active week for the county, very active 2 weeks, so thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
I just want to mention that I also was on the tour with Ms. Spicer, and Chris Eliezer is very open about trying to help us with understanding the sewer system that we have in this county, and he's very open to meeting with us if we would like for him to come in and give us, just an overview. To me, I see from the last time that I went, I see them working on deferred maintenance and making improvements in the plant there at Conross. And and seeing them look into the future with ideas such as getting rid of the chloride system and going to another system, which I can't say exactly what it is, but it's
Vinegar.
like using vinegar
Yeah.
to put in the water instead of chloride, which would be a lot safer. It could be a terrible accident that could take place with the, chloride in the atmosphere, that kind of thing. Anyway, they're also putting controls in, which is going to help with their labor. They're having to be there around the clock all the time. If they put in additional controls, they'll be able to let people take off some, things like that. So I see a lot of what they're really focusing on is they've got a plan. And the reason I'm spending so much time on this is because when we talking about subdivisions and where we're going to grow in the future, we've had developers come in here and saying, they've got to have sewer, to do these kind of things. So if we want to try to control growth, we definitely need to know where sewer is going to be going in the future. And we could even make some opinions as to where we would like to see growth happen and where we're not too excited about seeing growth happen. So I'm not making a motion or anything, but I think we should be thinking about having Chris Eliezer and Kyle and others that know a lot about the plant and know about the systems that are being run right now to come in and give us an overview and possibly come in annually and giving us an update. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. I hope y'all folks have been watching the news recently. Just watched Anderson County has a requirement in any development that goes on in Anderson County to have public comment. There was a proposed 48-acre campsite park. People put
RV Park.
RV park, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's going to be out on Highway 81, actually next to the Anderson Speedway, which you would think would be the perfect place for it. But the community spoke up and turned out in droves and actually swayed that commission to deny that proposal. And I think that's what we ought to give our citizens the opportunity to do. I think in the future should be one of the requirements if we come up with some standards and some development requirements that we should give the public. It's notified, they were notified within the paper, there were signs posted. The community turned out in strong numbers, 400 strong. They swung that vote and the commission listened to them. And that's what got my attention was the commission, I think, was ready to approve it, but they listened to the people. And I think that's what we should do. Although we are just an advisory council, Mr. John, we just advise. We have no say-so. Anderson and Pickens County commissions is final say. They are final say, and they also can make changes or recommendations. So being an advisory council thing, the game's played a lot different for us. But I really think we should continue to give our community people the opportunity to voice their opinion about some of these, because they're going to say the same things we're saying. The road's too small. The houses are too close. So let's listen to our constituents. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, our next item is staff comments.
I could. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I don't know if James brought this to your attention, but I think the agenda was on the website last week. I looked, James, when he posted it, said he got a message that it was put up, but I looked back at it today to see if anything was added, and it was not on the county website. The backup materials were there, and the agenda was included in the backup materials, but on the agenda section, it said NA, not applicable, as if you didn't have an agenda. So that causes me some heartburn if y'all were taking any formal action. The South Carolina Freedom of Information Act requires that if you have a website, you post the agenda on the website 24 hours in advance. So last I noticed, it was not there. And it's in the backup materials, so you can make that argument that it's there for folks to see it, but they would have to navigate their way to it as opposed to looking at agenda. So with that in mind, I think we should still have the discussion, because it's a discussion only regarding the subdivision, called it subdivision development standards, but I would hold off on the discussion on and report and recommendation on Chapter 38, because that's more of a legislative act, that's formal, that's required for that ordinance to be valid, and I think somebody could certainly cry foul if you were to hold that discussion and issue that report today when you may not have a properly noticed, in a sense, meeting, because the agenda wasn't posted.
So do we need to postpone that item and have it on the next agenda?
Yes, and it won't cause council any delay. You have a meeting, is it November 7th, James, is that correct?
I think that's right, yeah.
Council's next meeting, aside from tomorrow, they don't have a meeting in the first Tuesday of November, so they meet on the third Tuesday for the first time, so it won't cause any extra delay for council to hear it. So yes, it'd be my recommendation that you move to postpone it until the next meeting, so it's, it's properly in front of you.
So we need to make a motion to postpone item 8.
Yes, sir.
8 or 9?
8.
Eight.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to postpone item number 8 until our next available meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Sounds fishy.
It does something. How do we know?
With that said, would I hold public comment as well, Mr. Root, or?
If there are folks here to speak about it, I don't think that it would be out of order to take their comments. Certainly, like, they made the trek here and they may not be able to come to the next meeting. I wouldn't deliberate on it, I wouldn't discuss on it, but if somebody's here to make comments on that, I would take those comments.
Okay. We'll do that at this time.
Point of order, Chairman. I think we had people here to make public comment on non-agenda items, did we not? Did they get their opportunity?
We only had one.
Everybody?
We only had one,
Okay.
and we got 2 on this particular order.
I don't think those people those people should be commenting on the non-agenda item, the junkyard ordinance, which is not on our agenda for tonight. My understanding.
Well, I only had one sign up for the non-agenda. I had one sign up for the subdivision.
I think they mistakenly signed up on the wrong list, and so I'm asking.
Well, they can speak.
Give them an opportunity.
She'll be able to speak now. She signed this one, so we'll let her speak at this time.
I signed up for 38, section 38. I had sent you a letter regarding the junkyard ordinance. I wasn't coming up there to talk about that tonight because I didn't.
I'll withdraw my comment.
Never mind.
Would you like to speak?
I'll wait.
You'll wait? Okay, we'll do that. Mr. Markovich? I'll wait. You'll wait, so we don't have any public comment, so let's move on to the,
Mr. Chairman, you have one written comment. We can hold that to the next one as well. Just want to make sure you want to do that.
right, let's hold that off to the next meeting as well. All right, let's move on to item number 9, which is discussion of planning commission involvement in subdivision developments standards. We have Mr. John Maury.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, y'all see, since you're bringing up this topic, I didn't know it was on the agenda. I just came down here to give you a bad time. So, the item you're discussing is whether or not you should have input. You should be writing the regulations. And I'm blown away, sir, by you telling me y'all are an advisory. That's, sorry,
No, tell me what
I
you
did some
think.
time in law enforcement in the Navy, and I almost said something not nice for the public. That's not acceptable.
Agree.
Y'all should be reviewing everything. You folks, again, what I was saying earlier, you are the ones that are guiding. Council's repaving roads. They're repaving what's already here. You're looking at the future. And you should be the guiding light, and y'all should be developing these ordinances, and then they should go to council for approval. this is the way it should be coming back. And by the way, in the real world, there's always public comment on everything at the planning commission. As you were speaking of, that's just SOP. I mean, I can't imagine y'all are not doing that. But at any rate, I guess I've said enough. I would think that I support you, and you should be developing the subdivision regulations, not zoning, not roads, well, maybe not roads. Does your staff, could I direct you, sir? Do your staff have an engineering component?
We have a roads and bridge department with an engineer opening position. Position's open for an engineer. We're currently, are you looking?
No, actually, I applied in 2010, they turned me down. Yeah. So, I guess I won't try again, I won't do that again. At any rate, the roads are very, very extreme component, as you probably know, of the subdivision regulations, so, and they're also 1960 right now, as we discussed. So, thank you for the opportunity. The offer still stands.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, I will open up the floor for discussion on this item. Mr. Root?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you're good, I was given a few questions, but if I could, just to make sure we're on the same page. Mr. Morey?
Yes, sir.
Morey, you said you had one page of Oconee County ordinances or regulations that were pertinent to subdivisions and zoning?
That's correct, in accordance with your website, yes.
Did you go to the municipal code, the code of ordinances for Oconee County, and look at chapters 26, 32, and 38?
I think that is 26 that has the one page.
26 is the roads and bridges. It's certainly about 40 pages. And does the design standards for the road
Yes, sir.
incorporating the DOT standards?
Yes, sir, I'm familiar with that.
So that's what you're referring to?
Circa 1960.
Okay. And then, same thing, certainly, if y'all were to take within your authority to approve subdivisions, consistent with the state law, you would have public comments. And I will throw out my caveat, warning, admonition, or whatever. If you are to respond in applying the standards that would be in place to public comments and shift a decision that might otherwise be accurate in applying the standards based on folks who are saying, not in my backyard, or something of that nature, that is certainly the quickest way to get sued and lose. So, just with that said first, now certainly the public is helpful in saying, hey, perhaps it doesn't meet this standard, or bringing things to your attention that you might miss. But if you're applying the standards correctly and the public is coming out and clamoring just for a different decision, that is a certain and definite way to get in the ditches. So just as to that, one question. Y'all gave me essentially 3 questions. One was, well, there's 2 questions as to the Pickens Unified Development Ordinance. And again, Pickens has a pretty robust UDO. It has a number of articles in it, certainly over 100 pages at a minimum. But you asked, how does Pickens get away with a subjective criteria? That's within Article 12. So I looked and reviewed their whole UDO, and y'all probably did that, and I would recommend that you do it, because you can't just look at Article 12, or certainly not that section in a vacuum. They have like I say, it's a very robust UDO, so Articles 1 through 16, I think, plus appendices, all go into the criteria when they're approving a subdivision proposal. In any event, these items on 1205F, regardless of what they say, it doesn't mean it's so, but they note that these are the following objective criteria. And I would say that if you look at these in light of the criteria that they have outlined in the other articles within their UDO, they are objective, except for, I think, F. And that stated, does the proposed use reflect a reasonable balance between the promotion of the public health, safety, morality, or general welfare, and the right to unrestricted use of property? I think that probably borders most closely on a subjective question that could, get you outside the bounds of what would be lawful. But the other questions that they have listed here, I think are objective. Is it consistent with other uses in the area? Would it adversely affect the usability of adjacent nearby property? Is it consistent with the comp plan? Would it be burdensome to the infrastructure? And is it consistent with the requirements set forth in the UDO as a whole, which include off-street parking, setbacks, buffer, and access? So again, looking at their whole UDO, those are pretty objective criteria that they apply when they're reviewing subdivisions, and I guess they call them major subdivisions. But it goes back, and so I guess my ultimate question, question to me was, how do they do it? And we couldn't. You could do this. If you were to reorchestrate how your regulations are written, so you have something more akin to a UDO. They have, I'm not going to call it a floating development district, but it's a general development district. It's almost like a wait and see approach, that nothing is essentially zoned until, everything's general development until it's proposed. And then they apply these criteria to see if it's approval worthy, I guess, or not. So it's a very different framework, for lack of a better word, than you have. But aside from F, I don't see that there's anything wrong within the contours of their framework with those questions. Yes.
Gentleman I spoke to today, the difference in what they do in Pickens and what we do here is they have very little sewer outside the incorporated parts of the county. So they don't have to deal with the subdivision pressures in the unincorporated areas because they just don't have the sewer. And that's, I'm kind of a bit confused why you're saying that theirs is very not applicable to us. And the difference is because they don't have sewer in the county. And so, that kind of concerns me a little bit that, why can we not use that or add some agendas or addendums to it to make it work here?
I'm not saying that their UDO laid on top of the topography, the population, all of these factors in Oconee County wouldn't work. I'm saying if you just put this section, 1205F, and stuck it in with the development standards that we have now, it wouldn't work.
We see that?
That's all that I'm saying.
Right.
Because they have different law, and you have to look at the law as a full body. Their unified development ordinance is very different than the way that we have it structured here. So that's what I'm saying. It's not different.
Okay.
They have many similarities as
So-
far as the population, topography, infrastructure, et cetera.
So does it go back when you say law, Pickens County more current? Is that what that's saying than us or Oconee, or is that, why does the law part of that not work here?
That's outside of my bailiwick to say they're more current or proper or I don't do policy questions. It's just different. And so.
Is it government structure? I mean,
Well, certainly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm fine, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the structure is very different ultimately because for major subdivisions, their planning commission is doing the approval. So that's the big part of it. It's different. And in their approval, they're applying these standards that are in 1205F, but within the context of the whole UDO. And if and like I said, it's a very thorough Unified Development Ordinance. I think when I first came up here from Charleston, I thought, hey, that would be a good thing. And I think Tom and I got in our first arm wrestling match about that when ours came up. And, learn to work with what you have now, which are in chapters 32 and 38 for the most part, which are something, Mr. Moore, that the Planning Commission has drawn over time. The Planning Commission has developed chapters 32 and 38, and they have sent it on to the County Council, which naturally is the only truly legislative body that can approve those ordinances. So it would really take, it's not that it can't be done, but it would just take a wholesale change or substantial change to go to the same kind of paradigm that Pickens County has, if you wanted to apply it here. So that was the first question that you gave to me. There's two questions along that. How can Pickens County do it? But that was the essence of it. So, good? The next one was essentially why are they not stopping in Powdersville and coming here, but is we'll go off of Mr. Nix's motion that could the planning commission come up with a set of criteria that if a developer submitted a particular subdivision plan, I say particular, it met some criteria by, say, number of lots, intensity of use, or what have you, that would trigger them going into a particular zoning district. Because I watched the meeting twice and looked at how the motion was framed. I did not see that there was any further discussion on what particular zoning district they might go into. But is that a possibility? So we'll just start, is it possible that a developer meets criteria X, and we'll just say number of units, and because by virtue of that, then they are automatically zoned into District X. I mean, I think that's the bare bones of that motion, filling in the X's as you go. As a point, as a matter of law, yes, that can be done. I say that with a lot of disclaimers afterwards. And James, if you could put up 629, 710.
We don't have zoning. We don't have zoning. I mean, how is that even relevant?
Okay, we're getting there.
Okay.
You were asking the question on how you could get there.
Okay.
I'm not saying,
Well, we have zoning, we do have zones. I mean, we do
Chapter
have,
38 is full of them.
we
Yes,
do
sir.
have a charting of zones into which we could put said development if it meets a certain criteria, and then that particular set of zoning requirements would apply to it. Like residential, residential farm. I mean, we do have those zoning,
We have them on paper, but they're
Identities.
not. I mean,
and they have a set of rules associated with
Right.
them. So if we decide that subdivision X that's being applied for meets a certain criteria, it could be self-zoned into one of those zones. We just have to say which one it is, depending on the criteria.
Are you saying the commission picks the zone for the?
No, the rules pick the zone. The commission decides how the rules are laid out. We come up with the rules or the criteria, propose it, and then once it's implemented, then it works. It just works. The process works. And we're independent of that. It's a form of planning, but it's not us hands-on planning and reviewing every subdivision. It's a start. Could be a start.
Thanks. You do have zoning. It's just folks have not decided to zone in a particular area, and county council has not, as a policy decision, has not zoned for, I think folks will say top-down zone and place people in these particular zones. But you have certainly control-free being the most ubiquitous and initial zone, and then you have traditional rural residential, conservation, agricultural, residential district, lake residential, community, commercial, highway, industrial, ag-res, public or recreational lands, mixed use, and of course you can create planned development districts. So all of those are on the books now and can be used, and folks can zone into those. Generally, it's going to happen by their own petition. And that was the third question we'll get to, is there's a 50-acre minimum requirement. So those are all there. So I think that the essence of the question is, can a developer be forced to go into one of those? And I think, as I took it, and this is me reading between the lines, and tell me if I'm wrong, the notion was perhaps that you could have a developer meet certain density requirements if the developer has so many lots that they're going to do. So, yes, again, with a lot of caveats afterwards, and that's why, and maybe they're on your screen too, hopefully. That's why I wanted us to just go back to state law on this, because it just gives you the anchor that you need. And I think the part that we're missing, that Mr. Morey spoke of it, y'all have talked about it a lot. And folks have talked about the comp plan as being, 360-page book that is just put up on the shelf. But I was glad, to see it spoken of earlier, because it is, what the planning zoning decisions are made out of. So if we look at this section, zoning ordinances must be for the general purposes of guiding development in accordance with existing and future needs and promoting public health, safety, morals, convenience, and y'all can read, and general welfare. It lists as particular items that zoning should focus on. And it's good, I think goes to Mr. Gollin's point. You all can think about areas that you want to have more building, or more residential, or more commercial, or more industrial, and areas that you do not want to have. So that's the planning component, and that's what I wanted to underscore, because if you do these things outside of planning, if you just, we don't want the growth to come in the way that it's coming, so we want to have it be less dense. A developer's going to have 20 units, or we want them to be on half-acre lots or whatever. If you do that outside of these guiding principles, then you're going to run afoul of the law, because you're going to run into equal protection concerns, probably substantive law due process concerns, and others. But if you go back to the anchor that you have to plan first, then it can work. But you have to get to the planning element, which is, so ultimately, the same question that we have with the moratorium: what's your why? Why do you want the developer to be put in a particular zoning district? Starting there, and then you figure out, all right, so then there's the where and what are the requirements for that district. And if you can, I think that's probably the main essence of that. If you could go up to 720, James, which is the next section, excuse me. So this notes here what can be essentially regulated by zoning districts. And I don't want to get into case law that really parses out specifics out of this statute, because it's very clear black letter law. These are the items that can be, let's just say, regulated in your land use regulations. Use of buildings, size, location, height, density of development, area and dimensions of land, water, and airspace to be occupied by the buildings, off-street parking, tree preservation, landscaping, other aspects of development and land use that are necessary to accomplish the purposes set forth throughout the chapter. And then B, regulations must be made in accordance with the comprehensive plan for the jurisdiction. So that's what I was underscoring. Excuse me, I got a hoarse throat. But that's what I was trying to underscore. Because if you do the plan of the developer's going to go into some district, because he's got a certain size of development, without that being predetermined and that developer being on notice of what he's buying into or she's buying into or it's buying into, then that causes a problem from a legal standpoint. So they need to know, and they need to know by virtue of the plan that you all have laid forth for the county, which is, why do we want to have this area zoned or used in this particular way? Why do we want this area to be more dense perhaps than another? You talked about a really good reason, Mr. Williams, the last meeting I was here at least, when you're talking about maybe we want to focus development and incentivize development where you have sewer. That's good planning. And so then you draft ordinances around that. But if you, I guess C is the one, if I recall correctly. Okay, so yes, the zoning ordinances that you develop may utilize the following categories, which, we have a couple of those at use now, or any other zoning or planning technique for the implementation of the goals specified above. The goals specified above, again, are the particular uses and types of uses that you want to regulate, and then those relate back to Section 710, which are the goals and the plan for the community. So it all works together as a whole, and it all stems from planning first, and that's what keeps us legal. So that's where, if you just, in a vacuum, say, we want this developer because of the size of the development to have to, jump through these hoops or have these hurdles, that's problematic. So that's my very long monologue answer to what was, but it's a very good question, and it's an important question because it goes to the planning, and that's, well, yeah, you're an advisory committee, but that's the advice that you're giving council, is the plan for the county.
I've got a question for Mr. Root. I do want you to address the 50 acres and see if that's something that can be addressed or changed, but my first question, when we are trying to lay out the why, can it be as simple as, because we've all understood that what's happening in development right now is for the most part control-free. They're not going into a current zoning district trying to do something that's outside of that current zoning district. So it's the control-free that's eating us up as far as development or risk of. Can it be as simple as when the developer sends us homes that it can default to residential, and if they send us commercial, it can default to commercial, and when they send us a PUD, it can default to that? Or do we need to be more specific and talk about net density and things like that within the why?
I think the more specific in the why, the better. Obviously, it's based on, so it's going to come down to a constitutional standard. Does the governmental entity have a rational basis for doing what it's doing? So that's the real test. And so that why has to be, the more specific, obviously if it's tied to a rational basis, then the better.
Okay.
So with control-free, can that be considered like a floating zone to where somebody came in to propose something, and then we fall back to those questions, something similar to what Pickens was doing, to determine the zone that they go into? Is that an option, or does it all have to be laid out prior to the?
That is an option, and so floating zone is a type of zoning technique that's used a little bit differently, so I'll veer away from that terminology, but I know what you're talking about. And I'm not a land use planner, I'm just an attorney I've been dealing with these issues off and on for a couple decades. I think what you're talking about with the floating zone is kind of like short zoning, which is I don't know about communities doing it, but certainly municipalities do this, where they'll zone the whole area, whole municipal incorporated area for very low density. And then, so it's kind of a wait and see approach. So then if somebody comes up, a developer comes up and knows that this procedure's on the book, all right, we want to have a higher density development. So here it is, and this is why it's gonna work. Otherwise, it's prohibited, so everything's kind of prohibited unless it's low density. We wanted this high density development. This is why it's going to work, because we have infrastructure, because it's generally going to fit the community. Overlay these Pickens County questions on it, and then it's zoned into that, floating, if you want to put it that way, specific district that is essentially created for that entity. That's one way to approach it. That's a way that's been done before. So, yes, you can legally do that. I'm not saying I would recommend zone the whole county, low density and have people carve out exceptions to that. But that's a lawful means to do it if it's consistent, with the plan for the county, which is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
So it sounds like some of the stuff that we're talking about Pickens, though, one, we understand that Pickens has a very robust plan and that we have to come up with everything in writing first so that the developer can check the boxes. It sounds like your example just then was, but what if the developer wants to go outside the boxes? Does that not fall back on the BZA rather than planning, or would it be something that planning would undertake instead of BZA?
It would, the way that one's set up is and I see what you're saying, it's almost like a variance, but it's really not. So that is a redoing. I put that out as an example. And again, not a recommendation. I will beat this drum 100 times. I don't make recommendations on policy. Y'all do that. County council does that. I'll just do the best I can. to keep us out of the ditches. But it's not a variance from, in the same sense of a variance to the BZA. Because a variance to the BZA is, we've got these set criteria, but we can make an exception for it if you have very particularized circumstances. And so you make your argument to the BZA of these particularized circumstances, why it should vary from the law. With this short zoning idea, and I don't even know if South Carolina has something similar to that, it's already embedded into the law that you can get higher density, but you're gonna have to meet these criteria for it. Infrastructure, whatever could be in there, you know, the nature of the topography, nature of the population groups, you know, ecological, environmental, agricultural concerns, all of those are taken into place. So it's all laid out beforehand. So it is a variance in a sense, but it's not the same kind of variance of, you know, like say a road
So,
standard or what have
going
you.
back to your statement, it's still in writing. It's not our opinion.
Right.
It's still already written down. It's still a box to be checked.
It is, but I don't want to get too narrow with that, because planning commissions, like I say, Pickens, I think, has a lawful UDO, and I know they don't feel like they need my opinion on that, but they do have one, and it's not just box checking. Their commission does apply, you know, their discretion in using those categories in 1205F and seeing if that development fits. When you get there, though, it's just like sidewalks in public right-of-ways. I'm gonna say, you know, don't do it, because that's gonna expose the county to additional risk. But if you're gonna do it, all right, let's do it this way. And so, don't do it, but if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna get into the business of approving subdivisions, then maybe it's the time for the county to do that. Y'all, policymakers, think about the criteria specifically, and that one on F, I think, is one that's troublesome. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Nix.
Okay, so I wanna propose a simple case study, and this is by no means the direction I think necessarily we should go, but a simple case study. Let's say your criteria is greater than 30 homes and less than 1 home per acre in the subdivision is proposed, and that there's an exception to the 50-acre rule for this particular self-zoning yourself into a particular zoning, which we're gonna say is residential. Where would that series of 3 little rules fit in? Would it be section 38 or section 32? Where would we put that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That was one of the problems I also had. Why-
This is a very simple,
why I argued.
very simple, very simple
It's-
proposal.
The way that 32 and 38 have developed over time is kind of a Frankensteinian approach that some, you know, they bleed together, and I think that last was a design, or develop, I forget what they were called.
But 38
Development
contains
standards.
38 contains the residential zoning criteria,
It's
right?
just supposed to be zoning, yes, and 38's really just supposed to be land use and development, but there's a lot of zoning type actions that are in chapter 32 that might better be in chapter 38. And 38 content, subject matter, is applicable to chapter 32, so you got to do the best you can, unless you're gonna scrap them and start over, to harmonize them. So when a particular ordinance comes up, yeah, obviously you can think of, is it gonna apply countywide? And is it going to be clearly affecting one of the areas that are, you know, that are in subsection 710 up there? That's most likely is zoning, it's most likely chapter 38. Is that responsive to your question?
So, no, it doesn't answer my question.
Okay, I'm sorry that I missed it.
So, if we were to propose greater than 30 houses, greater than 1 per acre, and make an exception to the 50-acre rule, those 3 criteria, if you meet those criteria, it puts you in, it automatically puts the developer of the subdivision proposing it into residential zoning as opposed to control-free.
Okay, so
Where would you put that? Is that workable? That very simple
Yeah.
change?
I think it's workable as I understand the proposal, And it would be with cross references. I think it'd probably be in 38, with cross references to 32 when you're doing your subdivision submittal. But as I understand it, you're talking about, all right, you're gonna be developer, if you're going to make a subdivision of this ilk, it is going to be in residential zoning, and as part of your subdivision plan, you're gonna have to petition to go into residential, right? So that's, it's both. It's gonna be
You're
30
self-zoning, and you're exempt from the 50 acres down to 30 acres.
Yeah. So
All the way down to 30.
It's gonna be in
You
30,
make that decision as the subdivider, as the developer.
Right.
Not some, I mean, it's a rule, but you make that decision to do that or not. It's your choice.
I think it's doable, and I think it, even within the 38 and 32 do cause me some heartburn, but it's 38 with references, or 32 rather, with the subdivision approval process, with references to 38, which are the residential zoning standards and the rezoning standards. So they'd work in conjunction, they would have to cross-reference one another. Certainly is something that can be done. If now's a good time to touch on it, the 50-acre requirement, just based on intuition, was done to keep from piecemeal zoning. So you had, all right, if folks are gonna rezone, we're not gonna have 5 acres that are industrial, 5 acres that are ag, 5 acres that are residential, or 3 or whatever, all over the place. So I think to me, that makes common sense that when they initially rolled it out, if it's gonna be rezoned, then let's have big chunks. So you have some uniformity, it's consistent with some plan. But there's no impediment to reducing that. And I talked to Amanda Brock, County Administrator, because she was around. She thought the particular number was probably a function of public comment that came out at that time.
Now,
It can be changed, yes.
is somebody gonna inevitably whine about, well, I don't want these 25 homes on 0.5 acres of, 12 and a half acres beside me? Yeah, they're gonna complain about that. It's not an all-encompassing solution, but I think we need to start with something simple and something that we can argue over, then go from there. Not something complicated.
I think it's great for the developer to self-zone if we don't have the appetite for zoning in the county more than what we've done. I do think we need to correct some of our zoning. I think it's strange that we have rural residential at 1 home per 5 acres and agriculture at 1 home per acre. It seems like it should be the opposite. So there maybe need to be some cleaning up within those. And is that possible? Maybe I should ask that question.
It is, yeah, sure.
So we clean up some of those zones, and then we let the developer, based on some trigger, zone into a category. But once they do, they're no longer control-free, which is the animal that we're trying to control. This is the control-free lack of zoning criteria.
Well, and the other thing that, in my mind, that addresses is the property rights piece. The property rights piece. If somebody obviously wants to develop their own property, it's gonna be a property rights issue for them. But if they want to sell their property to somebody else, then the subdivider or the developer coming in is gonna know what the rules are, and they're gonna make that decision. So to me, that's not a property rights issue for the seller, unless they're their own developer.
Right. I have thought that was a great win and great way to get started.
What do you think about, the more people I talk to, they seem not to know about the option of self-zoning. But they like that because then obviously zoning is bottom up, and that's a friendlier way to address the problem. So what do you think about like putting an ad in the paper or, hey, residents, you are able to do this, come talk to us and here it is and here's a piece of paper, kind of give them some guidance and see what kind of response we get.
I think you could do that, kind of coterminous with if you're changing to 50 acres or whatever, but I think anytime that you're gonna ask me, can we do more notice, even if it's not legally required, I'm always gonna say, yes, please do that. So the more notice you can, by the more means, certainly getting the required notices out, but usually for hearings, it's just 15 days public notice, that's the legal requirement. And oftentimes it's just not enough to get people to really get in the know that there's an issue and then get themselves informed. So, yes, it can happen. I think it's a good use of county money. Because y'all want input in that regard on the front end when you're doing stuff, as opposed to it's already been done and then people show up, like I said before, not in any demeaning way, but with pitchforks and torches and we don't want this in my backyard. And then you're put in a real difficult position to say, all right, we're going to change. We're going to do what they say.
For David's example, I guess order of events, it would be developer with self-zone, then it's pick the district, and then it's whatever the third option was, whatever you said, David, right? You had to pick the self-zone as the last thought, and I thought, shouldn't that be the first thought?
I don't think it's gonna actually work
Does
just
it-
like that, I don't think.
Yeah, I think
But-
as understood it, Mr. Nix's example was the development has certain criteria, density criteria and size criteria that are gonna
We'll
fit.
determine that.
Yes, that are gonna fit a particular district. So, hey, if you're gonna do that, then you're gonna go into this district. It's on your own volition. It's a function of what you're gonna develop though. Right? Is that it? Okay.
So maybe for us, as to starting to take a bite out of this elephant, one thing would be Mr. Root could determine where this is gonna fit within our rules, whether it's 32 or 38 and how those are gonna incorporate. And we come up with the trigger points that says X number of home triggers this. Add green space to that equation and it triggers this. Add road issue to this and it triggers this. And that we come up with the triggers that would then place somebody in a criteria of whatever zone that might be.
I would think the triggers first, if you could come up with those, and then I'd write it in after
Right.
that, because it would help me to know. But I think the essential framework is going to be the same each time. It's probably with this and perhaps with subdivision review of certain sizes coming in front of you all, if y'all decide to go that route. It's going to be 32 in conjunction with 38, and then we're just going to have to do it with cross references, but it can be made as clean as we can make it, short of sweeping everything away and starting afresh, which
I do think that Mr. Williams was right several months ago when he said we need a subcommittee to try to whittle this down a little bit. I do think that at some point we need to create that. I don't know that it needs to be us. I think it needs to be developers and us saying, how do we get ourselves into that criteria? What do we need to do to put ourselves in that criteria?
Now, can I say my piece, Mr. Chairman?
Good.
Hey, I appreciate all this concern, and I think we're moving forward now that we're asking questions, and got Mr. Root really giving us some great advice. But here's what I want to say is from my perspective and what I'm here for, once we get to the development issue, I've lost. And what I mean by that is my objective here is to conserve land in this county. I know I can't stop, or we can't stop every development, but I think our first concern should be green space, open land, and not subdivision after subdivision after subdivision. Now, I don't know if anything we've talked about can curtail any of that, but I feel we're moving in the right direction. Self-zoning is a wonderful idea, I think. I think it could work, but I think that's also a way to kick the can down the road from government's responsibility to implement proper zoning or proper development standards. Because what I feel is that puts neighbor against neighbor. And I think we're going to see a lot of that if this Sewer South project comes up soon and they open up thousands of acres down Highway 59, southern part of the county. You know, Frankie might want to put his in agriculture, 50 acres, but the neighbor don't. And then the neighbor going to say, well, you're hindering the price of my property by doing that. I really just think that's just I like the idea, I love it. That's our only option. But what I want to ask James over there, has a single developer came, I think we have like 20 on the books, asking to be self-zoned?
Yeah.
there's your answer, guys. They're not gonna ask to be self-zoned.
We don't have anything to do that with, so they wouldn't ask that.
I mean, that's just encumbrance on their development
Don't
plan
have
is.
to right now. so.
Because they don't have to do it now.
I know, but what I'm saying, they're not gonna ask for it because that's just encumbering their money they're gonna make.
Once
They
they
don't-
know the rules, they will.
They don't ask for a stop sign to be put there either, but the rules tell them they have to put a stop sign. This is the same thing. Until we create the rule, they're not gonna adhere to anything because there's nothing for them to adhere to. So we've got to create the rule.
It creates
gotta take
discussion,
one
though. That's what I
step.
wanna do. It creates discussion, but I just don't think I mean, if it's our option, self-zoning, we really need to have somebody that's educated and can go out and meet the public in their environment, in their communities, and discuss this. But having a public meeting in a place like this, you'll have 4 people show up.
But understand, we're not talking about self-zoning. The first objective is not self-zoning. The first objective is to create criteria for a developer to have to follow and fall into.
Well,
And they become zoned because of that.
from the developer's perspective, you're correct. I'm looking from residential owner, property owner perspective. I want my constituents to be able to clearly understand what self-zoning is and how it protects them or protects their interest.
And I would definitely go back to that agriculture that we tried to do 4 years ago, and the agriculture group said, never mind. After there were 200 and some odd people that wanted to participate in that zoning objective, said, no, never mind. So
Well, there's always got to be, you got to have a point person, you got to have organization. I don't know if any of us, I certainly don't have time for it, but I certainly am a supporter of it. And, but, like I say, I'm here representing landowners, cattlemen, farmers, property owners that don't want all this subdivision development. And my objective here is to put a roadblock in some of that if possible, in a legal way, sir. But,
and tell them not to sell, because remember, it's the big landowner that's causing the big development.
well, that's correct. The people own their own property and they can sell, when a man's sitting there with a check in his hand, it's hard to
That's the
turn down.
hardship, is he may not want to sell, but the children mind.
Right.
And that's where, again, if you go to agriculture and change it to 1 house per 5 acres, doesn't matter if the kids want to sell. The person that set that up into an agriculture zoning said that that's what they want that land to be in posterity.
My final comment would be if we're going to really concentrate on these subdivisions or high density numbers, I think we also should give equal attention to preserving property or preserving land.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I wouldn't agree with you about the subcommittee because I've tried to corral that before, and it's difficult. Especially when you get people from the community coming in and giving ideas such as, we shouldn't be talking about that, we need to be talking about this problem over here. When you're just trying to come up with something as simple as definitions. So, I mean, I've seen that not work well. And so what I would then do is look to James and Vivian to see if, how much support can they give us? Could this be a special project within, their regular workload? And if it is, then I think that would help a lot to get good information to us. And plus, I don't want to leave anybody behind because it's such an important issue. Sometimes within a subcommittee, you're going to talk about things and you can't replicate it unless you've got 30 minutes to tell everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just as far as process. I'd rather try to discover whether or not James and Vivian and Mr. Root's input, that kind of thing, if we could comb this out a little bit before we start going to a subcommittee.
Well, until tonight, as you all know, I've spoken out against having a subcommittee, that I felt like it needed to be in front of the cameras as a whole body. I do like the idea of maybe directing this to staff a little bit. I just don't know that this group up here has enough knowledge about the development stuff to talk about the development stuff. Because we've had proposals that we've shot down that, as a group, that accomplished exactly what we're trying to accomplish by doing this, and yet we shot it down because we didn't understand it. So,
Question. Would it help to have developers come and speak before us and us ask them questions here during our meeting, or?
I think we need more, I think we need to come up with some criteria one, I think we need to come up with what we believe the problems are listening to the constituents. Is it density? Is it green space? Is it too many driveways? I've heard Mr. Williams say all three. I've heard you talk about the clear cutting of the land. And so we need to come up with what are the problems that we're hearing and then start trying to create solutions to that based on these trigger points. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and it was brought up during the last council meeting. I know James, now my office is right next to his. He's a very busy fellow. And so not that he couldn't or wouldn't want to embark on, getting a planning design out for the county. I think it might be something for you all to consider, county council to consider, again, is having a planner, a professional entity who does this, help. I'm not saying to drive the ship, but just help. So the meetings are orchestrated in such a way to get public comment, people who have, so you're not reinventing the wheel, who've, we did it with a comp plan, like it or not, we had a lot of meetings and had a lot of public input relative to what we usually get. And it was, it's a thorough plan. And it's got a future land use element in there that should be a guiding document to whatever it's worth. And it's going to be updated soon, or at least reviewed for updated in a couple of years. It wouldn't be a bad time to start looking at it. But somebody like that who is dedicated to their career to coming in at times like this to help, so y'all aren't overwhelmed with the issues and you're really just more making decisions off of a menu of options.
I love that.
Might help.
Speaking from a county side, what are we looking at cost-wise for someone like this? Because we had a problem asking for the funds to hire the consultants to help us with the comp plan. They didn't really want to do that right off the bat. We had to do a little persuading to get that done. So what kind of money are we looking at? Because this is not a dog park or anything like that. This is actual help in the county. So how do we, how much money are we talking about here?
We get proposals would be the only way to find out, is send out a request for proposals, to
Mr. Chair.
procure it.
Go ahead.
I like what Mr. Root said, and I would certainly support that. I don't think there's any reason why we can't have some conversations with James and Vivian and that kind of thing. But, and going back to Mr. Nick's comment, I think if we start with something very simple, that would be a good way to continue the discussion. So I'm not, ready to pull the trigger, but what I see the advantage of and what you're offering is also take a look at 38 and 32. See if we can clean this up. I mean, professionals will be able to do that for us. It's just a matter of paying them to do it.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we take my little bitty case study, 30 acres, greater than 1 unit per acre, with the exception you go down from 50 to 30 if it's self-zoned. This is just for residential. Just put it in residential. Assume the residential rules apply. Take all of our subdivisions that we had this year and go look at those and see if this particular rule would have improved or changed how those subdivisions were how they panned out as far as density. If we could take a look at that, would that give us some idea of?
Tell me the criteria again.
Okay,
If it's over
greater than
30
30 units
30 units.
with less than 1 unit per acre, greater than 1 unit per acre. An exception from 50 acres down to 30 for self-zoning. And if they meet that criteria or exceed that criteria, they go into residential zoning for chapter 38 and or 32. and look to see all the subdivisions that we've had apply this year, see how they would have been affected. See if it would have made a difference. Would it have made them less dense, or would it have, we don't have any way of knowing whether the subdivider would have backed out.
We need a second.
But we need some data to help make us a decision on at least something simple, in my opinion. That's my motion.
You'll second the
I'll
motion.
second the motion.
And then let me make sure I understood, because there may be a criteria overlap there. You're saying, under your example, 1 home per acre?
No.
No,
Greater than, proposed greater than, density greater than 1 home per acre.
per acre. But residential is 1 home per half acre now, isn't it?
Quarter.
It's a quarter for utilities and a half for non-utilities. So if they're on septic, it's
And that's what I was saying, it's septic, everything's septic. So
quarter if they're on sewer would be a half acre on septic.
half acre on septic. So do we want to,
But control free is what?
Nothing.
Whatever you can
yeah,
get.
anything you
You
can
can
do.
put 10 on an acre if you can get them there.
So what you're saying is the developer comes in, he's putting in something that's less than 1 per acre, and then he goes into residential, he'll automatically be kicked into 1 per half acre. Is that right?
Sure.
Okay.
We were saying anything that's greater density than 1 per acre, so it's the 2 and up is what I'm assuming.
Yeah,
That's right, it could be, he already could have a density of
Yeah.
point, one every
Or
point,
whatever. Okay,
one
so
acre.
less than an acre. Gotcha, I got you. Anything that was presented less than an acre. which
Right.
Maybe everything.
So the task.
And it may not make a difference. That rule, that criteria may not make a difference, but we need to know that. We need to know what criteria would make a difference if we want to make a difference.
Gotcha.
And that
Where are our
study, I
thresholds
think, that
based on
simple
that?
study by the staff will determine that, I think. It will give us some information in order to help us make a decision.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion carries 6-1.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Without any further discussion, do I hear the famous motion?
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed?